Start off. Om Sada Shiva
Shiva-samarambha
Shankaracharya
Shankaracharya-madhyamam
Asmadacharya-paryantam
Asmadacharya-paryantam
Vande
Vande
Guru
Guru
Paramparam.
Paramparam
Om Sahana Vavatu
Sahana
Sahano
Bhavatu
Bhunaktu
Sahanau Bhunaktu
Sahaviryam
Sahaviryam
Karavavahai
Karavavahai
Tejasvinavadhitamavidvishavahai.
Tejasvinavadhitamavidvishavahai
Om
Om
Shanti
Shanti Shanti
Shanti.
Shanti.
Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya.
So we will now on the 54th verse. So let us chant that. Arjuna Uvacha
Arjuna Uvacha
Thita Prajnasya Ka Bhasha
Tita Prajnasya Bhasha
Samadhisthasya Keshava
Samadhisthasya Keshava
Sthitadhi Kim Prabhasheta
Prabhashishaha
Kimasita Vrajeta Kim.
Kimasita
Just muting all of y'all, and we will please keep yourself muted. Okay, so look at the grammar portion. Arjuna Uvacha Sthita Prajnasya Ka Bhasha Samadhisthasya Keshava Sthitadihi Kim Prabhasheta Kim Asita Prajeta Kim. So Kim with a halant below the ma, so Kim Asita. And the Anvaya is Arjuna Uvacha Sthita Prajnasya Samadhithasya Ka Bhasha Keshava. Full stop. Sthitadhi Kim Prabhasheta. Full stop. Kim Asita. Full stop. Kim Rajeta. Full stop. Or you can actually say it's question mark because these are all questions. So Arjuna Uvacha. Arjuna said, Sthita Prajnasya, one who is established in wisdom. Sthita means firmly established. Prajnasya, the knowledge or the wisdom. So the one who is established in his wisdom. And how is he established? Samadhihi. Within Samadhi, within his own self, Samadhisthasya. He is established in his own self. In Samadhi, he is established. Ka Bhasha. What is the description? Hey Keshava. So, hey Krishna, what is the description of a person who is a jnani? That is what he's asking. Again, Sthitadhi, one who's dhihi. So, dhihi here, dhi refers to the intellect. Dhihi refers to Atma Jnanam. Sthitadhihi, one whose intellect is firm. Kim Prabhasheta. How will he speak? Kim Asita. How will he sit? Kim Vrajeta. How will he walk? So these are the questions that Arjuna has. Okay, now what does it indicate? See, he's saying, hey Keshava, what is the description of a person whose wisdom is firm and whose mind abides in Samadhi all the time? How does such a person whose mind is absolutely incapable of being shaken, how does such a person speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? So Arjuna is asking for the benefits of spiritual sadhana. Will there be any transformation in his life? And his question is, supposing there is a person who has successfully gone through stages of karma yoga and jnana yoga. He has followed a religious life of karma yoga. He has got jnana yogyata, that is, he has got purification of mind, chitta shuddhi he has got. And then he withdraws from life, he withdraws from all activities and starts the process of self-inquiry. And having done all that, assuming that he is successful in his efforts, he has become a jnani. So this person is a person whom we call a jnani, and Arjuna gives a special title to such a person, Sthita Prajnaha. Sthita Prajnaha means the person whose knowledge is absolutely firm. He is very clear about what he is talking about. He is free from all vagueness. He has no doubts about his knowledge at all. And such a person of firm conviction, he is called Sthita Prajnaha. And then he gives another title, Samadhishtaha, the one who is ever established in Samadhi. So here you have to take it as ever established in his own true nature. And if you look at Shankaracharya's commentary, Shankara says Samadhi has to be understood as Atma. The normal meaning of Samadhi is what? Nirvikalpa Samadhi. A state of deep meditation with no differences, right? Nirvikalpaha. But Shankara says no. Samadhi has to be taken as Atma. So Samadhishtaha, that has to be taken as Atmanishtha, the one who is firmly abiding in his true nature, who never forgets that he is Brahman. That is the Atmanishtha. Okay, so when you say this term, you will find very often in the scriptures, Atmanishtha or Jnananishtha. And in English, you'll find a lot of books saying abiding in the true nature, residing in your true nature. So what does it mean? It means that a person who is always aware of his true nature as Brahman, even while he is going through all day-to-day transactions. This is what is meant by Atmanishtha or Jnananishtha or abiding in true nature. So while studying the scriptures, this person knows that he is different from the body. He has understood that he is Satchit Ananda Atma. So this is true of all of us, right? When we study the scriptures, during the class, we are very sure that we are Atma only. What kind of Atma? Satchit Ananda Atma. But the problem is that the moment I go out of the class and put on my chappals, then all my petty, worldly personality comes back. All my transactional problems also come back. Therefore, it is not enough that I know my true nature in class. This knowledge must be available throughout the day to help me in my day-to-day transactions, especially when I am facing a problem, especially when I am having a crisis. So unless this knowledge is available to me when I have a crisis, that knowledge is of no use to me. It is as good as not being there, right? And there is a story in the Mahabharata of Karna. Do you remember the story when the knowledge was not available to him?
Yes.
When was it not available?
When he needed it the most, when his chariot,
When his chariot was stuck in the wheel, was stuck in the mud, right? So when this, that is the meaning here. When the knowledge is not available to you, when you need it most, that knowledge is as good as not being there, which is what happened to Karan and which led to his death. And that is the example of this knowledge. That knowledge has to be available to you, especially when you are facing a crisis. If it is not there, then the knowledge is of no use to you. It is as good as if you have had no knowledge. And such a person he calls Samadhisthasya. The person is Samadhisthasya. He is the one who never forgets his real nature. So two names have been given here, Chitaprajnaha and Samadhisthaha. Then there's a third name, Sthitadhihi. So this verse has different names for a jnani. The first one is Sthitaprajna, the next one is Samadhisthaha, and the third one is Sthitadhihi. The meaning is the same as Sthitaprajna. So dhi, as I said, means knowledge, intellect means knowledge. Sthitadhihi means a person of clear knowledge, doubtless knowledge. Because for him, this knowledge is a fact. Right? It's not information coming from the scripture. It is not hypothesis given by some teacher. It is not somebody third-party knowledge which I'm getting. For me, it's a clear, doubtless fact. Only when that is there, then I can say that my knowledge is firm. And Arjuna says, of such a person, Hey Krishna, sthita prajnasya. The suffix asya means of that person, of a person who's a jnani, ka bhasha. So normally the word bhasha means language, but here bhasha has to be understood as what is the description of such a person. And then he asks some further questions. Kim prabhasheta, how will he talk to other people? So, right, literally, Kim means what? Okay, but what will he talk to other people? That is not what is meant. How will he talk to other people? Similarly, Kim asita. It is not what will he sit. It is not grammatical. It is how will he sit. So Shankara here says that Kim, Shankara is very specific. He says, take this Kim as how. So how will this Jnani sit? Does he sit in Padmasana? Does he sit in Sukhasana? Or is he in Sirsasana all the time? Arjuna's question is, what exactly is the physical description of a Jnani? Right? If you go to Kedarnath and Badrinath, you will see plenty of people who are, at least they call themselves sannyasis, and they are doing all sort of things. Okay, and they do also not knowing what to do. They have no guru, they have no teacher. They will do anything. So some people will not sit at all. They will stand permanently. I've seen people who hang on to a board tied to a tree and say, I don't sit. So if you don't have scriptural guidance, if you don't go by the scripture and the teacher, you will torture your body with all sort of things which have no meaning anywhere, right? And finally, they don't reach anywhere. So here, Arjuna also thinks that a jnani must be not a normal person. He's an abnormal person. Because if he does everything like any other person, then what is the difference between a jnani and ajnani? So these kind of doubts can come. And that's why it is said in the scriptures that if there is no teacher, then the sannyasa ashrama can be a very dangerous ashrama, because it can lead you to all sort of misconceptions. So Arjuna has also got some misconceptions. So he says, will he walk? And if he's going to walk, how will he walk? Will he walk his hands upside down? How will he walk? So all in one word, Hida Prajna Lakshanani, the indicators or characteristics of a jnani, what they are. And Shankara in his commentary makes a very interesting observation. He says the virtues in the jnani, which are natural to him, are the sadhana to be followed by the sadhaka. It's a very, very beautiful statement. That which is the indicator of a jnani, that is the discipline to be followed by us as sadhakas. So if, for example, for a jnani, humility is the indicator, which means that he is naturally humble. There is no scope for pride in him at all, because for him there is no other person. So where is the question of pride? So humility is the indicator, the lakshanam for the jnani. But humility is the sadhana to be followed by the sadhaka. For us, it is not spontaneous. It needs effort. So what is spontaneous is being called lakshanam over here, indication. What needs effort is sadhana, the discipline, right? For example, we can take another characteristic. Worry. The jnani never worries, right? Because that is his own nature. He is Atma himself. What is there to worry about? The entire world exists in him. There is no worry at all. So whenever we worry, we should be, as a sadhaka, this indicator of the jnani that he is without worry, for us, it should be deliberate. Whenever we find ourselves worrying, we should become aware and then deliberately disengage ourselves from that worrying thought. How? Do some japa, do some karma yoga, go for a walk, listen to some music. Deliberately disengage from that worrisome thought. Break that habit of worrying. So worrying, like most things, is also a habit. And if you do regular practice, whenever you worry, one of the best sadhana is to just sit down and do some japa. That focus on Ishvara will sooner or later result in that habit being broken. And then you will find that the state of not worrying will become almost spontaneous for you, right? Another thing is anger. We get angry spontaneously. That is the lakshanam. The effortlessly getting angry is the indicator of ajnani. And for us to not to express that anger, that requires effort. So not to express that anger is sadhana for us. And if we do that regularly, whenever I find myself getting angry, I should disengage from that thought. I will find that freedom from anger sooner or later becomes spontaneous for me. At that point of time, if you want to get angry, there is a deliberate effort required. That is, getting angry becomes a sadhana. Right now, not getting angry is the sadhana, right? And hence, we can give advice to a sadhaka. Every indicator of a jnani, every lakshanam of a jnani, you should try to imitate. So fake it till you make it. That is the solution. Right? This is what is the interpretation behind this very, very beautiful verse. Now we will look at the next verse, verse number 55. Please unmute yourselves. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Partha Manogatan Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha Stita Prajñastadochyate. Okay. So, look at the words. Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan. And Atmanyevatmana has to be broken into Atmani eva Atmana. 3 words. Atmani eva Atmana. Tushtaha. And Stita Prajñastadochyate has to be broken into another 3 words. Stita Prajñaha tada uchyate. And the Anvaya is Shri Bhagavan Uvacha He Partha Yada Sarvan Kaman Manogatan Prajahati Kama Atmani eva Atmana Tushtaha Tada Stita Prajñaha Uchyate. So Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Lord said, Hey Partha, hey son of Pritha, Yada, when. So whenever there is a Yada, there has to be a Tada. So Tada will come later. Yada, when. So Yada Tada is a pair. So then, when, or when, then. Okay. So when Sarvan Kaman, all desires, Prajahati, one renounces. Prajahati is to renounce. So Sarvan Kaman Prajahati, when one renounces all desires. And very importantly, the timing of the renunciation is given. Manasogatan, Manogatan. As and when they arise in the mind, you have to renounce the desires, not afterwards. Afterwards, it might become difficult. So, Sarvan Kaman Manogatan Prajahati. The desires have to be abandoned at the very instant that they arise in the mind. And Tushtaha, you should be happy. How? Atmani eva Atmana. You should be happy by yourself, in yourself. Atmani eva, in yourself. Atmana, by yourself. When this condition is fulfilled, actually there are 2 conditions. So one is Sarvan Kaman Manogata Prajahati. Abandonment of all desires as and when they arise in the mind. The second condition is Atmani eva Atmana Tushtaha. I will be happy by myself, in myself. Tada. Then. So this tada has to be connected to yada. When this then has to be connected to the earlier when. Tada. What will happen? Stita Prajñaha Uchyate. So Stita Prajñaha is the Prathama Vibhakti, the first case. So it refers to the person. Because of the Visarga over there. Stita Prajña simply means firm knowledge. Because of the visarga, it becomes Sthita Prajna. That means the person having the firm knowledge. Therefore, when these two conditions are satisfied, this person is said to be a person of firm knowledge. And this is a very, very important sloka in the second chapter. It's called the Sthita Prajna portion. The next few slokas are that portion. And if you read the bhashyams, the commentaries of Shankaracharya or other authors also, Vidyaranya, all the authors, you will find that they quote these portions very often. So it is important because, as I said before, you have to fake it till you make it. So once you know the characteristics of a jnani, what is advantage? I have a model to guide me in my spiritual sadhana. So these characteristics, the Lakshanam as it is, they serve as a guideline to all the seekers in sadhana. And Shankaracharya says in his commentary, Yani Sthita Prajnasya Lakshanani Tani Mumukshoho Sadhanani. Very specific. Yani Sthita Prajnasya Lakshanani. Those traits, those characteristics, which are the natural characteristic of a Sthita Prajna, of a Jnani. So Yani Sthita Prajnasya Lakshanani. Those characteristics which are natural to the Jnani. Tani Mumukshoho Sadhanani. Those same characteristics will serve as the sadhana required to be carried out by other people. Therefore, a very important guideline for every sadhaka. That's number one. Also, it can be used as a measuring rod to measure ourselves with, a framework, so to say, in which I can check myself and see to what extent I have got benefit out of my sadhana. Right? Because very often people ask this question, how do I know whether I have become a jnani or not? So the first question, of course, they ask is, how do I know if somebody is a jnani or not? And when you tell them that it's not important for you to know that, then they'll say, okay, how do I know when I have to become a jnani or not? Why is that important? Because once I have become a jnani, I don't have to come to class anymore, right? Class becomes redundant. So it's important to know when you become a jnani. So if you want to know whether you have become a jnani, these verses are the indicators, are the framework for us to check ourselves. Any doubt, you can check up by studying these verses. This is the reference framework. And it's important to say here that this portion, some people, what they do is they take this portion and they start judging their family members. So it is not meant for that. Don't use this portion, the traits indicated here, to judge others. It is meant to judge only ourselves. So that's this portion. So Krishna also discusses another topic here, which is called Sthita Prajna Sadhanani. The sadhanas that are to be practiced to become a Sthita Prajna. So to briefly recall whatever we have learnt of the discipline or the stages required to become a jnani. What are they? First is, of course, Karma Yoga. Then is Upasana Yoga. So Karma Yoga, we know it takes care of what? It takes care of Mala, all the impurities of the mind. Then Upasana Yoga takes care of Vikshepa, the restlessness of the mind. Once these two things are handled, you have what is known as a mind which is fit for Jnana. So Adhikari or a Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampanna Adhikari. The person who has got all the four qualifications which is necessary for Jnanam, he is called an Adhikari. Once that has happened, then he comes to Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga consists of 3 stages. The first is Shravanam. Shravanam means hearing, actually hearing, receiving the scriptural teaching from a teacher, which means no self-study. You can't pick up a book and say, I will study. So it should be scriptural teaching, and that too, I should receive it from a competent person. Otherwise, I will get into all sort of wrong interpretations because of, if I read myself, the understanding will be through the filter of my own mind. And therefore, I will get into all sort of incorrect interpretations. This is so because to extract the meaning out of the scriptures, there is a particular method, right? And that method is called Sampradaya. which we will be seeing in due course, what exactly it is. And therefore, receiving the scriptural teaching, what is the benefit? The teaching will reveal my true nature. Shastram, revealed to me by the teacher, will tell me who I am. And therefore, for me, both the scripture, the Shastram, and the teacher are like mirrors. Like normally, when you want to see your body, you need a mirror. And therefore, if you want to see yourself, your real self, you need a special mirror, which is called Guru Shastra Upadesha. The scriptural teaching is a verbal mirror. And if you appropriately use this teaching, which means if you use it as taught by the teacher, then it will help me understand my real nature, discover who I really am. And therefore, Shravanam removes Atma Ajnana. Self-ignorance is removed by Shravanam. What is self-ignorance? Thinking that I am the body, mind, self-complex. That is self-ignorance. Therefore, Shravanam helps in self-discovery. Shravanam serves as a mirror to show me who I really am. So this is the first stage of Jnana Yoga. And all these stages, they are mentioned in the various Upanishads. So Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it says Atmava Are Shrotavya Mantavya Nididhyasitavya. So very clearly the Upanishad says Atmava Are. To discover the Atma, you should have Shrotavya, Shravanam, Mantavya, Mananam. Nididhyasitavya, you to have your Nididhyasanam also. These three are the stages. Okay. So once Shravanam is over, or Shravanam is going on, as and when I am hearing the teaching, for a thinking student, several doubts can come up. And the teacher does not, in our tradition, the teacher will not say that you believe what I say. Because Shastric teaching is not a matter of belief in the teacher. It is a matter of understanding always. Remember that Shastric teaching, intellect is involved, buddhi is involved. Whenever understanding is involved, buddhi is involved. And whenever the intellect, the buddhi is involved, a sharp intellect, a good intellect will never accept something unless the intellect is convinced. Blindly, you will never follow. So it should be logical. Whatever is being taught should be logical. It should be in keeping. It should not contradict my day-to-day experience also. Right? For example, if I pick up this and say I'm holding a tiger, you won't believe, right? So you can deceive everything in this world excepting your intellect. And if your intellect is not convinced, then even if Krishna himself comes and says, you will not accept. Krishna can come before you tomorrow morning and say, so this is so and so. You are not going to accept, because first, for acceptance, your intellect has to be convinced. So the faith, as defined in the scriptures, it does not exclude intellectual operation. It's something very important to accept. The scripture will never say, I say, therefore you believe. You have to believe it by knowing, by removing all doubt. That is called doubtless knowing. And that is the way that the scriptural teaching has to be understood, not because the teacher says so. And therefore, the teacher allows the student to think rationally. And he has to understand that until the intellect of the student is able to accept the knowledge without any doubts, that knowledge is not complete. That teaching is not complete. And if there are any doubts regarding this teaching, while Shravanam is going on or after Shravanam is over, then the student is free to raise any number of doubts. The teacher, there is no such thing as an illogical doubt. There is no such thing as a silly doubt. Teacher will allow the student to raise any number of doubts. This raising of the doubts and the answering or the satisfaction of the doubts, this is the Mananam process. How do I raise the doubts? I have to ask myself. Shastram says so and so. For example, scripture says, my teacher has told me that I am not the body, I am not the mind. So I have to ask myself, my intellect actually. Are you convinced? Is the intellect convinced that I am the body and I am not the mind? And is the intellect convinced that I am this Atma, I am this consciousness principle functioning through the body and the mind? And until the student is convinced, the teacher has to be ready for any amount of discussion. This is the tradition which we follow. So this is the second most important part of Jnana Yoga, which is called Mananam. And in Mananam, I remove all the intellectual obstacles. By Shravanam, I have removed ignorance. By Mananam, I have removed all the intellectual obstacles, all the doubts. And therefore, that knowledge which was received through Shravanam has now been converted into doubtless knowledge. Shravanam gives knowledge. Mananam, following Shravanam, converts that knowledge into conviction. So that knowledge is no more idea or a hypothesis, but for me it becomes a fact because my doubts have all been removed. So Shravanam gives knowledge. Mananam, following Shravanam, converts that knowledge into a fact, into a conviction for you. That is Shravanam and Mananam. And then comes this third stage. So up to the Mananam stage, I have only handled my intellect, right? I have asked my intellect whether you are able to accept whatever is being said, and assuming that the teacher has answered properly, or that I have done my own Mananam, I have thought about it myself, I have talked to my colleagues, I have looked around, I will assume that post Mananam, doubts have been removed. So there are intellectual problems have gone away. But that is not enough. Because even with doubtless intellectual knowledge, problems can be there, right? So this intellectual knowledge has to undergo a third stage. That intellectual knowledge must be converted into emotional strength. Physiological, psychological strength has to be converted into. Why? Because when you interact in daily life with other people, mostly you will find that it is the emotional personality which is predominantly interacting. And therefore, if you go and study the lives of most people, you very rarely are reactions from the intellect. They're always the emotional personality which transacts. And if I do not strengthen this emotional personality, if I don't strengthen the personality which actually gets into transactions, that knowledge will be of no use to me because it will remain isolated in a small island. And I will still be reacting from my emotional personality, which has not been touched by the knowledge. And therefore, in my day-to-day transactions, I will continue to be angry, afraid, frustrated, worried. All these things will happen. So there is a paradox here. In spite of having complete, doubtless knowledge, I will continue to remain an unhappy, ajnani in terms of responses. Knowledge-wise, I'm complete. But in terms of responses, my responses would be exactly the same as that of ajnani. Therefore, if I have to enjoy emotional freedom, which is actually the mark of a jnani, right? We have said free from worry. I should also be free from all unhealthy responses coming from the emotional personality. So I should be free from all unhealthy emotional responses. I should have what is known as emotional immunity. Whatever somebody says or does, whatever situation I face, my emotions should be absolutely stable. Right? And therefore, this intellectual understanding is useful to me only when it is converted into emotional strength. And that's why the conversion of IQ, intellectual quotient, into EQ, the emotional quotient, is very important. Otherwise, the knowledge, the intellectual knowledge does not get converted into psychological strength. Only when the psychological strength is there, then only I can interact with the world free of any problems. So this conversion of IQ into EQ, this conversion of the doubtless knowledge into emotional strength This is the third and the most important stage, which is called Nididhyasana. And to engage in Nididhyasanam, what do I have to do? I have to be completely objective. I have to first study my emotional weaknesses. Right? You have to be very, very objective. And if you are not able to do it, you have to ask somebody close to you. So very often we say you ask your husband or wife, they will give you a whole list of your weaknesses. Right? It's not a joke actually. You take that list, you look at it again using the torchlight of your intellect. You redo the list if necessary, figure out which of those are real weaknesses for you, and one by one, during Nididhyasanam, you have to work on them. You have to eliminate them. So this is the first stage of Nididhyasanam. You have to work on your emotional responses. You have to work on your emotional weaknesses. And one by one, you have to eliminate them. So it's a long process because all of us have got a huge list of weaknesses. So you start with the list. However long the list is, doesn't matter. You have this life, you have the next 1,000 lives also. Start working on that. Take the weaknesses one by one. During Nididhyasanam, ask yourself, this weakness of, let us say, anger that I have, is it justified? Because if I am Brahman, which is my doubtless knowledge, then where does this anger come from? Because Brahman is Satchit Ananda. And if the anger is coming from the mind, and if I am still giving into that anger, then the knowledge that I have that I am Brahman is not working. Because what is happening is the response is coming from the mind, which is Anatma. And in this manner, one by one, we work on those responses. And finally, when all the emotional weaknesses have gone away, then that knowledge has been converted into stepstha prajna, into firm knowledge. So through Shravanam and Mananam, I get knowledge, firm knowledge. Through Nididhyasanam, that firm knowledge is converted, that knowledge is converted into absolute firm knowledge. Wisdom is converted into. And in these two topics, in this chapter, rest of the chapter, these two topics are to be dealt with. Krishna is dealing with two topics. The first topic is how to convert prajna, wisdom or knowledge, into sthita prajna, firm knowledge. How to convert knowledge into firm knowledge through sadhana. That is the first topic. And the second one is, after you have converted that knowledge, that prajna into sthita prajna, what type of mind will you enjoy? That firm mind, which is incapable of any disturbance, that state of mind is the phalam, is the jnana phalam, is the consequence of the jnanam, the fruit of the jnanam, which is otherwise called Jivan Mukti. Okay. So with that introduction, a very long introduction, let us look at the shloka. So the first word is, second line, we'll take that one first. Atmani eva atmana tushtaha. A very, very important line. The jnani is one. Atmani eva tushtaha. Atmana atmani eva tushtaha. He is happy by himself. He is self-sufficient. He does not require any external factor to be happy. This is what is being said by Krishna. Now remember here that the non-dependency is for his happiness. But the jnani or otherwise can never be non-dependent for food, clothing and shelter. Physical dependencies will definitely be there. But as far as his emotional being is concerned, he is not going to go with a begging bowl. He may go with a begging bowl asking for food, but he is not asking anybody, will you love me? Will you take care of me? That he does not need. That is what is meant by Atmani Atmana Tushta. So that jnani, because he doesn't need love from anybody, because he is not looking at what do I get in return, he will appreciate that the love that he gives for people, it becomes complete. It is not tainted by what do I get in return. So his life is for giving love and giving care to people. But his life is not for begging for love. Because remember that as long as I'm a beggar, I'm always open to pressure from the one from whom I beg. And therefore, the Jnani's advantage is given here. Atmani eva atmana tushtaha. For the Jnani, if you have come, I enjoy your company. If you have gone, I don't get disturbed. So not only with regard to people, but with regard to things and situations also. Some situation comes, okay, it's a bad situation. Jnani will feel the pain, but he does not depend upon his happiness even on his own physical body. So if his physical condition deteriorates, even then he is not dependent. So that is what is meant by Atmani eva Atmana Tushtaha. So for most of us, my first gray hair makes me unhappy. My bald head makes me unhappy. My old age makes me unhappy, right? In Surya Namaskara, one day comes when your back muscles pain. You can no longer do 108 Surya Namaskaras. You can no longer do Paschimottanasana. Your back goes pat the moment you do it. So does your happiness depend on all these physical conditions? You must ask yourself. So no, you regulate all your exercises, all your asana practice so that your body is doing only what it is capable of. But independent of that, your mental condition is not dependent upon your physical condition. Your happiness is not dependent on your physical condition. So that is what Krishna is saying here. Atmani eva atmana tushtaha. This is what we call purnatvam, completeness, freedom from binding desires. This is the first indicator, the first lakshana. So what do we mean about binding desires? So desires everybody has. Even a jnani will have desires, right? But there are two types of desires. Those which are binding and those which are non-binding. So binding desires are those desires, the non-fulfillment of which will make you unhappy. It disturbs your mind. Non-binding desires are those desires which the mind has, but if it is not fulfilled, it doesn't matter too much to you. It doesn't, your mind doesn't go into a disturbance. The difference between binding desires and non-binding desires. So this jnani, he still has desires, but all his desires are non-binding. If he is able to fulfill them, good. If he is not able to fulfill them, his mind is okay. His mind is still stable. But the ajnani, for him, most desires are binding desires. If the desire is not fulfilled, he immediately goes into a dizzy. Right? So this is the difference between binding and non-binding. So Atmani eva Atmana Tushtaha means that he is free from all binding desires. The second one is Rajahati Sarvan Kaman. So once there is only non-binding desires, that is a sign of Purnatvam, completeness, fullness. What is the natural consequence? So Prajahati, right? The word is actually Jahati. Jahati is to give up. The pra suffix or prefix, it stands for Prakashena. Prakashena is completely. So pra Jahati, total renunciation. Jahati is renouncing. Prajahati is totally, completely renouncing. So it is not just physical renunciation, it is also mental renunciation. And when you renounce mentally the desires, that is the only way to convert a desire which is binding into non-binding. So renunciation of all expectations, right? That is the key over here. All desires are born out of what? Very simple. It's like a person who wants to look for a walking stick. Why does he look for a walking stick? Because his legs are not strong enough to stand on their legs. And therefore, to be comfortable, if my legs are not strong enough to support me, I require a stick. Right? Similarly, when my image of myself is not as a complete person, is not as a full person, and I think that I will become full only when I have a house, I have a wife, or I have a child, that is a sense of apurnatva. It's a sense of incompleteness. So desire by itself is not the disease. Desire is the symptom, what we can see. Kama is the symptom of the sense of apurnatvam, the sense of incompleteness. And as we saw, Atmani eva atmana prishtaha. The jnani is complete in himself, and therefore he knows that he never sees himself as incomplete. He does not require anything to complete himself. So he uses the world, uses all the things in the world, but he does not need those things for his happiness. So the difference between using a thing is different from needing the thing. Needing the thing makes it binding. Without the need, when you use it, it is non-binding. So like the person who uses the walking stick for style. Some people have walking sticks when they go for their morning walks, but they twirl it in their hands. They don't use for support. For that person, the walking stick has become non-binding. The person who uses a stick for walking, for him it is binding. Similarly with desires. And kama here means dependencies born out of this sense of incompleteness. Knowing that thinking that I am not full, I have desires. Those desires are meant for completing myself. That is kama. And all these kind of desires, what does the jnani do? Prajahati. He completely renounces. Why? Because of his mental strength. And when does he renounce? Manogatan, as and when they arise in the mind. Innumerable number of desires arise in everybody's mind. And all these desires should be renounced. He will renounce because he does not need them to complete himself. He has discovered himself as Purna, as complete. This is called Kama Tyagaha, the renunciation of desires. This is the second main trait of a Sthita Prajna. So even when walking, he smiles, even if he's alone. So inside, there is a sense of fulfillment of Purnatvam. Outside, when there is nobody, this sense of Purnatvam is not expressed. When people are around him, then this sense of Purnatvam can be expressed in his transactions. Either way, whether it is expressed or unexpressed, he is still complete, he is still full. So, one who is free from desires. And then this desirelessness has to be understood very clearly, because scriptures talk about two types of desires. So there are allowed desires and there are prohibited desires. So we should clearly know what is allowed so that we can happily enjoy those desires. And we should also know what is not allowed. And generally, to give guidelines, desires which are permitted by the Shastram, they should usually fulfill three conditions. Number one, they should be dharmic desires, legitimate desires. Like the desire of a parent that my child should, grow well, he should be educated, he should get a good job, he should get married, he should be happy. All these things are desires, legitimate desires that a parent has for his child. And these are my duties towards my child, and I want to fulfill my duties. Therefore, it is a very, very legitimate desire. And Shastram says, okay, these are allowed desires. These are legitimate desires. You have to fulfill them. The second condition is moderation. So what we mean by moderation is that if your desires are so strong that and so many also, that our whole life is dedicated only to the fulfillment of those desires, then you have no time to devote to spiritual activity. Because however busy you are, if you are going to follow Shastram says it does not matter however busy you are, you should allocate some time for your sadhana. So whatever I do, I must always remember that everything that I am doing is anitya, is impermanent, is incidental. This is nitya, anitya, viveka, which we talked about in the Tattvabodha. So have any amount of desires, fulfill them. But remember that there should be daily time for Shravanam, Maranam, Nididhyasanam, all spiritual disciplines. You must not forget on a daily basis. So that is the second condition, moderation. And the third condition is that the moderate and legitimate desires should also be non-binding. This is a very, very important condition, very difficult to fulfill, but it is a main trait of a sadhaka. I have to convert all my desires into non-binding desires. Or you can say I have to convert all my desires into preferences. So the difference between the non-binding and binding desire is one is a preference, one is a desire. The desire has a potential to bind me. The preference is only a preference. If fulfilled, great. If not fulfilled, it doesn't matter. Binding desires are like a time bomb. They can burst anytime and disturb me. And therefore, I have to diffuse the time bomb by proper understanding. We saw that earlier, we saw in this chapter earlier. Karmani eva adhikara aste. There is only, I have the control only over the actions. And if you do this in this manner, if you understand in this manner and then do your actions, such a desire is called pure desire, Shuddha Kama. It should fulfill all the three conditions which we have talked about. And then life becomes like a cricket game, a 5-match series in which you're already leading 3-2. And the other 2 matches then are played like a jnani. Why? Because the result, whether successful or failure, that result will not disturb you because you've already won the game of life. In a 5-match series, if you're leading 3-0, you have won the game already. You won the match already. So the other 2 are to be played. You do your best, but the result doesn't bother you. That is the mark of a jnani. Work hard, but motive to work hard should be there. But that motive is now like the cobra with the fangs removed. That motive has no sting. And therefore, whatever happens, if the motive is not fulfilled, it will not disturb. So this person, he becomes a Sthita Prajna, and he has to go through 3 stages of life to sum up. The first stage is by following a life of Karma Yoga. He must purify the mind. So a religious lifestyle is first to be followed for getting Chitta Shuddhi. Secondly, he has to study the scriptures, especially the Vedantic scriptures, very systematically under the guidance of a competent teacher. And it's called Shravanam Mananam. So at the end of the first stage, he becomes a person who is eligible, adhikari for jnanam. At the end of the second stage, after he has finished studying the scriptures, he becomes a prajna. And thirdly, at this third stage is there, where the knowledge should not be allowed to remain at the intellectual level, but has to be converted into emotional strength, because it is through that emotional personality that we are interacting. And once that emotional personality has been transformed, then I will find that Vedanta is no longer academic for me. It has become part of my very life. The knowledge will help me wherever I have a crisis, right? So we require Vedanta when there is a crisis more than anywhere else. And therefore, this process of converting that intellectual, doubtless knowledge into emotional strength, that is called Nididhyasanam. And a person who has successfully done that is called a Jnana Nishtha, also called a Atma Nishtha, also called a Jivan Muktaha. He has insulated himself from the shocks of life. So the knowledge is like a Jnanam glove. Nothing in life shocks him. Okay. So with this, we'll stop. In case you have any other comments, any questions, I'm there.
Hari Om Acharya.
Oh.
If we have any desire and that desire is not fulfilled, that God has given something else, and we accept as a prasad, we are not getting affected with that. So is it okay?
That is the very purpose of Karma Yoga, right? Whatever you receive from the Lord, you accept as prasadam.
Yes.
But that is not Jnanam. Jnanam is different. There is a conscious effort that whatever I'm getting from the Lord, I accept because it is being given by the Lord. So that's a Karma Yogi viewpoint. Here we have not been talking about Karma Yogi in these verses. These verses are that referring to a Jnani. Jnani has understood that He is not the body-mind complex. Therefore, the desire is no longer binding.
Raviji,
Yes.
I was thinking that once we have started Nididhyasanam, right? So I think it all goes along with each other. Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam.
No. Nididhyasanam is a post-Mananam stage. You cannot do Nididhyasanam until your knowledge is firm. Which is why we don't even teach it
Because
anywhere.
when you were saying in the class, I actually could relate to 2 or 3 incidents where I felt that I have already started watching my emotional quality. I mean, how emotional I am and how I should try to, how I'm watching these emotional things that actually are putting me down or are affecting my today. The previous emotional baggage or my vasanas or my, so I have begun to watch all that. So that means that, and I also, my question was, I also have these desires, right? So does it go hand in hand, or should I completely, once you enter Nididhyasanam, that's it? I mean,
Oh, you will have desires anyway. As long as you've got a mind, you cannot avoid desires. The only purpose of Nididhyasanam is to ensure that those desires no longer bind you. And that can happen.
Acharya ji.
That can happen only at the Jnanam stage. At the stage of karma, you have to make an effort to ensure that these desires do not disturb you. But the effort is there. That effort disappears when you're a jnani.
And the first condition you told about the 3 conditions, right? The first condition, where it's your duty, right? As a mother or as a wife or as a parent, as a daughter. So to make the other person happy, in the sense that my duty has to be done in a complete way without having any.
It's a legitimate desire. It is part of your what is sanctioned by the scriptures. So it's a dharmic desire.
Dharmic desire. Okay.
Yeah, that is the first condition. Legitimate dharmic desire, which
So
means what? Sanctioned by the scriptures.
There should not be any selfishness in that area, right?
See, basically, whether it is satisfying your emotions or not, the definition is that is it sanctioned by scripture?
Okay.
Does Shastram say that yes, this is a legitimate desire? But that will count under Nitya Karma. Whatever are your duties under Shastram, that is going to be a legitimate desire for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Acharya ji,
Aji.
your teaching is, I am feeling transformation in myself.
It's not my teaching, sir. It is Krishna's teaching.
It is transforming me, and I'm feeling the change and feeling much elated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Om Acharya.
Om Acharya ji.
Okay.
Om.
Please.
I just had a question following what Mangalaji was saying about how the stages of Nididhyasanam goes. Does it mean that we get into that stage of Nididhyasanam after we have received and have firmed all the knowledge, or does it also go like as and when we learn, we process it, it becomes a part of what we embody?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I mean, if you're going to draw very firm lines between Shravanam and Mananam and Nididhyasanam, most of us will not do Nididhyasanam for the next 10 lives. So it's okay, providing you understood what is meant by Nididhyasanam. So for that, I would say that you should at least until the 6th chapter, you should not try. By the 6th chapter, incidentally, 6th chapter is entirely on Nididhyasanam. So once you have done the 6th chapter, you would have idea of how to do it. And then we can, usually what I do is I do an evening satsang where I do some sessions on sample sessions on Nididhyasanam. That also we can start. But essentially, you should wait till the 6th chapter.
Thank you, Acharya.
So like when we were discussing like in the first verse today, when we were discussing the Karna story, his chariot getting stuck in the mud. So like you said that because the knowledge was not assimilated well, it did not come to use when the crisis was there, and that led to his death. So my question is that if suppose we hypothetically assume that the knowledge was available to him in the crisis and he therefore acted differently, the free will was there, like he suppose acted differently because he say was a jnani. So then according like to what the free will was, is it possible to postpone the death?
I think you're confused. What he did not recall was the mantras.
Okay.
The mantras which would have enabled him to shoot the arrow. That is what he didn't recall.
Okay.
So
But
it's only an example to show that what happens when your knowledge is not available to you in real life. We are not supposed to go into the analysis of whether Karna could have saved his own death. It's a pointless exercise. So the idea is use that example and say that the jnanam which I have got, the Atma Jnanam, if it is not assimilated, will it help me in a crisis? It will not. And therefore, we should actually work toward assimilating that jnanam.
Okay, but sir, like another question with this only, I wanted to know, like doing the, like, can any kind of agami karma delay the prarabdha of death?
See, every karma, basically every karma generates phalam, right?
Yeah.
So every karma will result in some action. And every karma will result in some fruit. So if a good karma is generating punyam, that punyam also has an effect. But the purpose of delaying death, I don't know how that is relevant, because your whole idea of doing karma is to ensure that you get chitta shuddhi.
Yeah, not the purpose. What I wanted to ask was, is death already predestined that this is the prabal prarabdha and it will come whenever it comes, or it depends on our agami?
The prarabdha karma is specifically when it gets over, the body will die. So you might find that if you are doing a lot of good karma, you might find that there is a positive effect in terms of less painful effects of earlier karma, which would probably have been more painful had you not been doing good karma. But see, it's impossible to say whether you delay death or you prepone death. But general rule is that whatever is the prarabdha karma, when it gets exhausted, your death will occur.
Which means that when a person is born, that time it's already decided that how long the person is going to live.
That's an incorrect interpretation. The interpretation is that he has a stock of prarabdha karma. When the stock is exhausted, then he will die. So you cannot do anything for 10 years. And you may succeed in not exhausting karma for some time. Right?
Oh, okay.
Plus, whatever karma you do, agami karma, not all of it goes to sanchita. Some part of it can be going back to prarabdha also. So it's very difficult to say that this is the original stock and he will live for 20 years or 40 years or 60 years.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Om Acharya-ji, I don't have complete clarity
regarding? Rinku, your voice is dropped suddenly, fully. Hello? Can anybody hear what she's saying?
Yeah, I am able to. No, not.
Okay. No. Rinku, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So please say what you have to say.
Okay, sir. I was actually confused between the difference in Mananam and Nididhyasam. In Mananam, you mentioned that we reflect on the knowledge that has been given by the scriptures and the Guru and clear doubts and convert it into a conviction that whatever the Shastras is saying is correct and I am the self.
Correct.
Same time, you mentioned that we study our emotional responses.
That is different. Mananam stage, your knowledge is complete. That is all. Doubtless knowledge.
Right.
But in your life, even if you have doubtless knowledge, your reactions don't come from the intellect. It comes from the emotions. So Nididhyasanam stage is converting that knowledge into emotional strength. They are two different, completely different activities.
So converting the emotional responses. So we study the emotional responses during Nididhyasanam and see that now I'm getting angry, so I have to...
Not during Nididhyasanam. You study that during Nididhyasana, there's nothing to provoke you, right?
Right.
So you
It's
study your
application
life.
of knowledge.
You study your life, and then you say, these are my weaknesses, and therefore I have to apply this knowledge to those weaknesses. That is Nididhyasana.
Yeah. Application of knowledge.
Application of the knowledge. That is the Nididhyasana part.
Application or assimilation is similar.
It's the
in
same. Yeah. The application cannot take place unless you assimilate.
Mhm.
So
when we-
Acharya ji, the first two are theory and this third is practical aspect.
So you can put it that way if you want, but it doesn't really make a difference because the knowledge which you have. I'll give an example, like supposing I have a car, and it's a common example I use. I have a car, and one fine day I sell it off, and then next morning, there is a place where I usually hang the key, right? So next morning I go to that, by force of habit, I go to the drawer where I keep the keys. Doesn't mean that I did not know that I've sold the car.
Yes.
Does it mean I did not know?
No.
I know that I sold the car. What then made me go to that drawer for the keys?
Habit.
Force of habit. That is what is vasana. Habitual thinking patterns. This anger, jealousy, all emotional weaknesses are habitual thinking patterns. That is what you have to break. So just as, how do I break this habit of the key? You keep going in one fine day, you realize that, oh, the keys, I've already sold the car. When that sinks from your intellect into your emotional personality, then you will no longer go to get the key for the drawer.
Acharya, I have just one thing. I feel that sometimes it is probably the other way around. If you constantly kept on working on the knowledge, then the assimilation would happen and the emotional responses would automatically, slowly, steadily drop off as well.
That's what I'm saying. Constantly working on the emotional responses is Nididhyasana. You're going to ask yourself, who is getting angry? I, Brahman, I, the mind. And obviously it is I, the mind. Therefore, I, the Brahman is not assimilated. The knowledge is there that I am Brahman, but it's not gone into my personality.
So we surrender that thought into that anatma.
I wouldn't like to use the word surrender and all in these matters. This is purely intellectual, everything. Whole operation is intellectual. Surrender is not to be used. You have to ensure that your intellect understands at the emotional level that this anger is not belonging to you. And therefore you will drop it.
Okay.
That can come only when constantly, thinking about it. And during Nididhyasana, actually Nididhyasana is supposed to be 24/7. But for a start, we do, sitting Nididhyasana or standing Nididhyasana.
Right. Yes. Okay, Acharya. Thank you.
Om Raviji.
Yes, please.
Regarding the Prarabdha question somebody asked just now, I think the horoscope is largely a reading of the Prarabdha itself. In that case, when the child is born, they will be able to say whether the child will live a full life or Alpa Ayushi or something. So are they not saying how long the child will be living?
Well, according to me, Arvind, my horoscope says I've got 3 wives. I have yet to get the other 2. So, so much for horoscopes.
Okay.
Om Raviji.
Om.
In Gita, do we at any point of time, is there any discussion on why Arjuna was the chosen one for this Gita?
We discussed this in chapter 2, verse number 7. What is the reason? Anybody? What was the reason that Arjuna was chosen for the...
Because in that verse, we said Shadimam Tvam Prapannam. So you teach me how.
He asked.
He asked, yeah.
Shadimam Tvam Prapannam. And therefore, you do not give the teaching to one who does not ask. Since he was the only one of the Pandavas who asked, he got the teaching.
Okay.
Okay, so with this, we'll stop. Thank you for your patience. I would recommend that you hear this verse once again, this discussion once again, note down, because based on this, a lot of discussions are going to take place in future. Thank you so much.
Acharya ji, last question, please.
Yeah.
Can you just tell me when Krishna was giving Gyan to Arjun, or teen log, they were present. One was Hanuman on the Pataka, and one was Sheshnag on the wheel. And there were one more person who were listening what Krishna was telling. Can you just tell me?
I would rather stick specifically to the, this Puranic aspect of it. If you concentrate on it, it's going to confuse you. So as far as the story is concerned, all those are good things. But as when you're talking about teaching, there are only two people on stage, Krishna and Arjuna. So we focus only on those two. That is why the entire first chapter, does it talk about Sheshnag? No. Does it talk about Hanuman? No. It talks only about Arjuna and Krishna. And therefore the focus, that whole purpose of the first chapter is to ensure the dialogue is only between two people.
And
Thank
this
you.
is what separating relevant from irrelevant.
It's
is
about
what-
separating relevant from irrelevant, always. And the most common mistake that people make is to introduce the jnanam into the Puranic part and then try to justify it, and then landing up in all sorts of problems. So whenever you study Upanishads or Bhagavad Gita, you focus only on the teaching. When you're doing Puranas, then you can ask all these questions.
Thank you.
Om Purnamadav Purnamidam
Purnamidam Purnamidam
Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Evavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you for your patience. We'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.
Om
Thank you,
Om.
Acharya.
Thank you.